Welcome back everybody to Kerbal Space Program Interstellar Quest. We have arrived at episode 23. And the previous episode we went to Juna to set up some preliminary bases. And today we're going to follow up on two other missions. And the first one is the Steward mission, which if you remember well, we launched, I think, back in episode 19 or 17. I think it's 17. And it's on its way to Dres, where it's going to meet up with the Wayfinder rover. So the Wayfinder rover has been on Dres for almost 2 years now, collecting a lot of data. And more data than she can send home. Well, she can obviously send it home through the antenna network, but you will only get a very something like 40% of the size. Here we can see the satellite network that we dispatched with the last when we brought the rover. You can see it brought up nice eccentric orbit or circular orbit, but like the satellites are spread out really nice. So we have a nice relay network, which we're going to need because we detached our lander. And our lander is going to attempt to get a precision lander near the Wayfinder rover. Yes. So the Steward mission is for sample and technology. So it was something about sample return. I think I came up with a brilliant acronym the last time and now totally forgot about it. The lander is in a really interesting design. So I've discovered that with Kerbal Engineer you can see the torque that the engines make, and you're going to really get to torque down to 0. You can make asymmetric landers like this one, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. This is of course modeled after the Perseverance mission that's currently going on Mars, and the original plan by NASA to send a secondary rover to pick up the samples. I think that was an ESA rover, and then a way to get the samples back. But now they don't know how to get the samples back. You can see the little X in the right corner, which is the science return, or the science mod, which tells me if there are sires to be gained. I forgot to crop that out properly. But we have landed. It's time to deploy our connection arm and invite our rover to come over and attach to it. And it's been fun driving this little rover around. It's pretty sturdy, and using the control wheels, you're able to get yourself out of almost out of every situation I got myself into. I do think I'm going to build rovers with a little bit higher wheelbase with parallax. Nevertheless, we've been to 3 different biomes, collected a lot of samples, and we're collecting the last few bits, and are now lining up to dock with our spacecraft, which required more than one bump to get done properly, but in the end we were there. And now we're transferring all the science over to our little rocket, which is hidden in the payload. Here we go, 27 or 28. It's like lots of experiments are being transferred over, in the hopes that we will get a lot of more science back from this, if everything goes well and if I did all my calculations correctly. So it takes a bit of delta V to get back into orbit and then get all the way back to Kerbin. And if I calculated my heat shield correctly, then it should be okay. And as it turned out, we had so much delta V left. Here we go. The rocket is upright, clipping a little bit through the arm, so better extend that. And then control from our secondary docking port. Lock the hinges and get ready to take off. In real life, I did spend about a day on the surface to collect enough power and make sure everything went right and the satellites were up in orbit for us to have a good connection. And here we go. Just like on the Moon, you can go almost straight horizontal as long as you don't clip into any mountains. But this rocket has too much of a thrust to waste ratio. You can see me frantically trying to compensate for that. Nevertheless, we quickly get something like 6-7 kilometers up. So I decide to cut the engine coast to the apoapsis and then circularize up there. And that should bring us in a very nice orbit. The The orbiter is almost straight overhead. This is the small inclination change that we need to do to get into the plane of our orbiter spacecraft, which we left up there. And the orbiter spacecraft has lots and lots of delta V available. It still has its Kerbin insertion stage attached. So the second stage of the rocket is still attached, not even the transfer stage. And I had planned to use about half of the transfer stage, so we should be more than good. But who knows? We may need to slow down when we get to Kerbin. Never say that you have too much delta V before the mission is over. Here we go. We're doing the rendezvous. I'm pretty fluent in rendezvous around Kerbin. Rendezvous around different bodies. It's always a bit of trickery, especially when you launch in a very strange inclination and you almost burn straight into your other spacecraft. That was a very close pass. But yeah, automated docking sequence has started. MacJab is helping out us to get us aligned and do the docking. I think that's the kind of thing that at some point you have done it too often. Here we go. First docking in Dres orbit. And the little capsule on top of the orbiter is actually also a sample return canister. So now we can transfer all the stuff into that canister and then simply undock our small rocket. Leave it into orbit. I think I tried to crash it, but it really had only a couple of meters of delta V left. Yeah, checking out the second stage there, which should have been more and more than enough to get us back to Kerbin. But since we have so much fuel left in this stage, you can see me pop up the delta V stats from MacJab to see how much is left in this stage, and more than enough to do the insertion. I think it's going to take us about a year to get back to our beloved home planet, and then we'll see if the heat shield holds out and brings home all that science. I do hope I did pack an antenna or a parachute. Looking at the footage now, I'm not sure if there's a parachute on that capsule. I better check that before we lose our precious science. Yeah, so this is an Atlas rocket, I think. It is another mission to Jool. And the last few missions on Jool have been nuclear powered, as per our roadmap, trying to get to nuclear tug stages to sort of make travel to the outer planets cheaper. But the transfer window was coming up. We've not had a satellite in Jool orbit yet, and for less than 100,000 funds I can send 2 small probes to Jool to visit Bob and Paul. So that's what we're doing in this launch. That was a weird sound, something like 4 times speed up. So here are a couple of very small landers designed to land on the tiny moons of Jool. So there are 2 small moons on the outside of the sphere of influence, Bob and Paul, and I always get them mixed up. But I think Bob is the one that's in the same plane as all the other moons of Jool, but Paul is the one that has this kind of weird orbit out there. But here you go. We can see me set up the burn. The second stage has more than enough delta V to get us all the way there, and the little golden stage on top should have enough to capture us around Jool, at least into an eccentric orbit, and we're also counting on Talos to help us out a bit. And this is a little few days later. We have our first craft actually arriving, and you can see we can use Tylo to do our braking burn. Tylo is going to bleed off so much energy that we can get into a lower orbit. And this episode is all going to be about the ballet around Jool, in which we dance around the planets and use all this free delta V that's being passed around, because there's a lot of free delta V in the terms of passing in front and behind moons, especially heavy moons like Tylo, which you're looking at right now. Tylo is, I think, shaving off something like 1,000 meters per second from our journey, simply by being in our path and taking us along our orbit for a very brief moment in time. And yeah, so as we continue on, we arrive at Val. And Val really surprised me in this revamp. It is a beautiful planet, or a moon. It's a beautiful moon. Look at that texturing. There's a little bit of science to get. I cut off most of the science capturing because you don't want to look at all the dialogues. But Needless to say, I got about 1500 points of science from just this first part of the mission. And there's a second 1500 in the second half of this mission. But we'll get to that. So, Val, we don't have the Delta V to get into orbit of all of the planets and do the scanning and stuff, but we do have enough Delta V to do a flyby of almost all of them. So, we should definitely go back to Val because it looks beautiful. I'd forgotten how nice this icy moon is, which of course an equivalent of Europa. And we make a small course correction. Looks like a lot, but this nuclear engine takes very little fuel to make a course correction. So we are doing this to get an intercept with our main goal of this mission. And that is going to be a Leif. Leif or late. I never know how to pronounce that. I'm probably a Leif. And here she is. Texturing seems to be really weird, but that might also be the speed in which we're trying to render it. I don't think my graphic cards can keep up with all the beautiful stuff that BlackRag made. Look at the red lightnings that are happening in the sky. There's something super interesting going on in this atmosphere. Regardless, we are burning something like 800 meters per second to get into a circular orbit around Eve and do the first part of the mission, because we have seen through our telescopes that Leif has some really interesting atmosphere. It has oxygen, or appears to have oxygen in there, so we can start mapping it. And this is Scansat trying to figure out the biomes and the stuff. And we left her up there for about 2 weeks to do resource gathering, altitude maps, visual scans, biome scans, the whole shebang. And it is time to move on. So we are breaking orbit, and again we are trying to always look for moons that we can put in our path to kick us around this epic planetary system. Is it called a planetary system or a mooner system? I'm not sure what the name is for a system with all the moons. And we've completed the final two of our staging tanks. And yeah, it is time to move on. It's a bit of a longer burn, so we're heading out to Bob. And I could have had a couple of gravity assists, but that would have taken almost a year waiting for the perfect alignment, and I didn't want to wait a year. We had the Delta V, so why not just do it? The secondary target of our Wayfinder mission is Bob, and the idea is that Bob is, though it's very far away from the other planets, it has a super low gravity. It will take something like 50 meters per second to land on the surface of Bob, or even less. So it would make for a great fuel station. At least that's what we're thinking now. So we will set up a base here. You would get ore for almost free into orbit, which would be really nice. Our scanners have picked up liquid hydrogen and liquid deuterium in the Jool atmosphere. So this might be a place where we set up fuel depot and then move on to Jool to get all the good stuff and maybe build a base on Leif. I don't know. At least we get some very detailed map. You can see Scansat is in action. Don't go into a circular orbit. There's no need for that. Elliptic orbit will work just fine because the diameter is so small. And again, we spent about 2 weeks here gathering all the data and the maps, and it's time to move on. And of course, we can leave nuclear debris in orbit of your little moon, which we might want to use as a mining station. I can't see the harm in that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's not how NASA would do it, but hey, it's Kerbal Space Program. So we have arrived. Actually, every bit of energy we've used up until now was designed as the transfer stage. That is how overbuilt this design was. We are finally at the part of the design that I actually designed to get into orbit of Leif, do some scanning and stuff like that. So there's an opportunity to do something that I hadn't planned for, but I think we can do it because we've got a chroma meter on it, which means we should be able to get some very good readings of Jool's atmosphere. But for that we need to go really, really low, which means we need to make a couple of small burns. And you saw me fly by Tylo once again. And we're going to use the last bit of delta V to make a flyby over a couple of other moons, slowing us down into a very low orbit around Jool. So low actually that we dip below the 200 kilometers and are able to dive very briefly into the atmosphere of Jool. And here we go. First we make one more flyby. I think it was a flyby of Val or Leif, I don't remember. One final course correction. So I had a lot of fun setting this up. But it does take you like hours and hours to get everything just right. And here we go. And this is 1 kilometer down in the atmosphere. This is 199 or 195, something around that. Not enough to blow off my solar shield, because when I was looking the footage back, I was like, whoa, you probably should have retracted that solar panel. But it's fine. We're not that deep into the atmosphere. Look at those lightning and those clouds. This is super cool. And it also netted about 1500 science, because I could have all my instruments running while passing inside the atmosphere. A couple of cool shots of the clouds and the lightning, and then we zip back out, and now we need one more push in order to avoid going deeper and deeper by every pass. So we lined ourselves up with Leif, and this time we're not going to pass in front or behind it, but under it, and it's going to swing us up into an eccentric orbit and at a high inclination. And I think I have a shot of that. Yeah, there we go. And this will be our parking orbit. We did a couple of small things to stabilize this orbit. This orbit will be the parking orbit. The last thing that we can do is use it as a relay and as a science instrument, taking pictures of moons and maybe of our pale blue dot somewhere on the horizon. I wonder what other secrets the Jool system holds, and I guess we'll discover that in a future episode. And I hope to see you then.